December 20th, 1943, 10:30 a.m., 25,000 feet above southern Germany. The sky is a hard, merciless blue. At this altitude, the cold is not just uncomfortable, it is violent. It bites through metal, through wool, through bone. The wind screams past aluminum skin at hundreds of miles per hour, and every breath inside the aircraft tastes thin, dry, and sharp. You can almost feel it. The vibration in your teeth, the ache in your fingers, the constant, gnawing fear that one wrong sound means you are about to die. A B-17 Flying Fortress named Ye Old Pub limps through the sky. It is no longer part of the formation. That is a death sentence. Inside the bomber, chaos clings to every surface. The cockpit windshield is spiderwebbed with cracks. One engine is completely dead, its propeller frozen like a snapped bone. Another coughs unevenly, shuddering the entire aircraft. The intercom crackles. Blood pools on the floor. The tail gunner, Staff Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, is slumped forward in his turret. Shrapnel has torn through his body. He is alive, but barely. Every second counts. The waist gunners stare at him, helpless. They have been hit by flak, then fighters, then more flak, and now silence. Which is worse, because silence means the Germans are repositioning. Outside, black bursts of anti-aircraft fire bloom in the air like deadly flowers. Each explosion throws jagged steel in every direction, invisible until it rips through flesh or metal. The bomber shudders again. Somewhere in the fuselage, a man whispers a prayer. Another vomits into his oxygen mask. They are over Germany now. There will be no friendly fighters here, no easy way home. Just miles of hostile airspace and pilots who have been trained, conditioned to kill them without hesitation. And one of those pilots is climbing fast beneath them. The Hunter rises. Below the bomber, a Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6 claws upward through the thin air. Its engine howls, high-pitched, aggressive, alive. Inside the cramped cockpit sits Oberlieutenant Franz Stigler, age 28, a Luftwaffe ace. 5 American aircraft already painted as victory marks beneath his canopy. His oxygen mask hissed softly as he breathes. His gloved hands rest lightly on the controls. Not tense, not rushed. Calm. Focused. This is what he knows. This is what he has survived. Stigler scans the sky. Then he sees it. A lone B-17 lagging behind the main formation. Smoke trailing faintly. Control surfaces damaged. Guns quiet. A wounded animal. His mouth tightens. This is how victories are made. The radio crackles with clipped German voices, other pilots calling out targets, reporting kills, celebrating explosions that bloom briefly before vanishing into cloud. Stigler does not answer. He is already maneuvering into position. From behind and slightly below, textbook attack geometry, the bomber's blind spot, where the gunners cannot bring effective fire. He inches closer. The Flying Fortress grows enormous in his windscreen. He can see holes torn through the fuselage, jagged, black, ugly, like bite marks. One squeeze of the trigger, 2 20mm cannons, 2 machine guns, and the bomber will come apart. 10 men will die in seconds. That is the math of air war. Inside the fortress, the Americans know they are being hunted. The co-pilot glances back instinctively, though he already knows what he will see. Nothing. And everything. The rear guns are silent, not because there is no enemy, but because there is no one able to fire. The tail gunner is dying. The intercom is filled with short, strained sentences. Bandages. Get bandages back here. Hydraulics are shot. I can't feel my feet. We're losing altitude. Captain Charles Brown, the pilot, keeps his voice steady. Too steady. The kind of calm that comes when panic would break you completely. He grips the yoke and stares straight ahead. They are not making it home. He knows it. The moment of decision. Franz Stigler closes within meters, close enough to see faces, close enough to see something that stops his breath. The guns are not moving. No tracers reach for him. Instead, inside the bomber, he sees men clustered around another man. One is holding pressure on a wound. Another is shouting, desperate, frantic, but not at him, at death. These men are not fighting. They are surviving. Stigler's finger rests on the trigger. This should be easy. But his mind betrays him. A memory surfaces, uninvited. His former commanding officer, his mentor, a man who taught him how to fly, how to kill, how to remain human. "If I ever see you shoot a man in a parachute," the voice echoes, "I will shoot you myself." Honor mattered. Even here. Even now. Stigler feels his pulse hammering in his ears. He knows the rules. He knows the consequences. If he destroys this bomber, he will be praised. Another victory, another step closer to glory. If he lets it go and someone reports it, he will be court-martialed, possibly executed. The Gestapo does not forgive mercy. He edges even closer. The American pilot finally sees him. Their eyes meet through glass and air and ideology. The American expects death. The German hesitates. Seconds stretch. History balances on a trigger. An impossible choice. Franz Stigler does something no one taught him to do. He pulls alongside the bomber, wingtip to wingtip, close enough that turbulence rocks both aircraft. Inside ye old pub, the Americans freeze. This is it. This is how it ends. But the German doesn't fire. Instead, he looks at them. Really looks. Young faces. Fear. Determination. Blood. Then, Franz Stigler raises his hand and salutes. The gesture is small, but it detonates inside the bomber. The Americans stare in disbelief. Is this a trick? Is he lining up a point-blank kill? Then the German points, not at them, away, toward the west, toward the long, dangerous route that leads to the North Sea, and maybe, just maybe, home. He mouths words they cannot hear. Go. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then, Captain Brown understands. The German is not attacking. He is escorting. Flying with the enemy. Franz Stigler positions his fighter carefully, above them, between them and the flak batteries below. If ground gunners see the bomber, they might hesitate, uncertain if it is under German escort. If enemy fighters approach, they will have to go through him first. Every second he stays increases the risk. Someone could see him, someone could report him. But he stays. For miles. Through freezing air and hostile skies, two enemies flying together, not as soldiers, but as men trapped inside machines. No radio calls, no shared language, just a fragile, unspoken agreement. Live. Finally, the coastline appears faintly ahead, the edge of Germany, the edge of his protection. Franz Stigler rocks his wings once, a final signal. Then, he peels away, turning back to a war that no longer feels as simple as victory and defeat. Inside the bomber, the Americans watch him disappear. None of them speak. They don't know his name. They don't know why he did it. They only know one thing. They are alive. The silence that followed. Ye Old Pub crashes safely in England hours later. The crew survives. The tail gunner does not. At debriefing, intelligence officers ask questions. Did you encounter enemy fighters? Yes. Any unusual behavior? The men glance at each other and decide. They say nothing, because they understand something instinctively. If they talk, that German pilot dies. And somewhere back in Germany, Franz Stigler lands his fighter, climbs out, and wonders whether he has just saved 10 lives or signed his own death warrant. The war continues, but something irreversible has.
Franz Stigler's boots touch the concrete runway at Luftwaffe airfield Bad Wörishofen with a hollow thud. The engine of his Messerschmitt ticks as it cools, metal contracting, whispering like it knows a secret. Around him, ground crews rush toward returning fighters, counting bullet holes, tallying fuel, marking victories with chalk and paint. Somewhere down the line, another pilot laughs too loudly. Someone else lights a cigarette with shaking hands. To them, it's just another mission. To Franz, the world has shifted. The unasked question. He removes his helmet slowly. His hair is damp with sweat, despite the freezing altitude he's just descended from. His oxygen mask leaves deep lines on his face. He feels exposed without it, as if the thin rubber had been the last barrier between his thoughts and the Reich. An officer approaches with a clipboard. Abschüsse? Any kills? Franz meets his eyes. No. The word lands heavier than any confession. The officer nods, scribbles something, moves on. No suspicion. No interrogation. Not yet. Franz exhales, but relief doesn't come, because mercy has consequences, even when no one sees it. A dangerous memory. In the mess hall that evening, the smell of boiled cabbage and stale bread hangs in the air. Pilots sit shoulder to shoulder, voices low, eyes darting instinctively whenever a door opens. Every man here knows the rules, not the written ones, the real ones. Victory is survival. Mercy is weakness. Weakness is treason. Franz pushes food around his plate, appetite gone. His mind keeps replaying the image, the damaged bomber, the blood, the eyes of the American pilot when he realized he was being spared. That look stays with him. Not gratitude. Shock. As if the universe itself had broken its own rules. Across the table, another pilot brags about a B-24 that went down in flames. He reenacts the moment the wings snapped, laughing as if describing a hunting story. Franz does not join in. Someone notices. You could have had one today, the pilot says casually. I saw the formation. You were right there. Franz shrugs. He was already finished. The pilot snorts. That's the best kind. Franz says nothing. But inside, something hardens. The Luftwaffe is changing. This is not the Luftwaffe Franz joined. In the early years, there had been rules, a strange fading code of honor inherited from the Great War, respect for skill, respect for courage, even respect for the enemy. Now, desperation has replaced discipline. Germany is losing pilots faster than it can train them. Fuel is scarce. Planes are patched together. Boys barely old enough to shave are sent into the sky to die. And the men who question orders, they vanish. Franz knows this. He has seen it. A pilot who hesitated to strafe civilians, a mechanic who spoke too freely, a radio operator who listened to the wrong broadcast. Gone. No explanation. No funeral. Just silence. The weight of a secret. That night, Franz lies awake in his barracks. The wind rattles the windows. Somewhere in the distance, anti-aircraft guns thunder. Another raid. Another night of fire. He stares at the ceiling. He wonders if someone saw him escort the bomber, if a flak crew noticed a German fighter flying too close to an enemy aircraft, if another pilot glimpsed his silhouette against the clouds, if tomorrow an officer will tap him on the shoulder and ask him to follow. He imagines the questions. Why didn't you shoot? Whose side are you on? Do you sympathize with the enemy? There are no right answers to those questions anymore. He turns onto his side. Sleep does not come. Across the channel. While Franz wrestles with his thoughts, the men of ye olde pub are also lying awake, thousands of miles away, but bound to him now by an invisible thread. At an airfield in England, Captain Charles Brown sits alone in the dim glow of a desk lamp. The debriefing is over. Officially, the mission report is routine. Enemy fighters engaged, heavy damage sustained, crew casualties. Nothing unusual, nothing extraordinary, nothing that would get a German pilot executed. Brown closes his eyes. He sees the salute again. He hears nothing, but the silence of it is louder than gunfire. He understands something now that he didn't before. The man who spared them didn't just risk his career, he risked his life. And Brown makes a decision. He will never forget that face. Years of war, years of silence. The war grinds on. Franz flies more missions. He shoots down more aircraft. He watches friends die in mid-air, vaporized by flak, consumed by fire, spiraling helplessly toward the ground. Each loss carves something out of him. But that day in December never leaves. It becomes a private line he will not cross again, even when ordered, even when survival demands it. Then, suddenly, the war ends. Germany collapses. The Reich that promised glory leaves only ruins. After the fall. Franz Stigler survives. That alone feels strange. He walks through cities reduced to ash. He watches civilians sift through rubble with bare hands. He hears stories of camps, of crimes, of truths he had never been allowed to see clearly. He understands now what he was fighting for, and what he was not. Years pass. He leaves Germany, immigrates, starts a new life, tries to bury the war under routine, under work, under silence. But some memories don't stay buried. Some wait. A question that refuses to die.
1989, Florida, United States. The war has been over for more than 4 decades, but for Charles "Charlie" Brown, it never truly ended. It lives in the quiet moments, in the spaces between breaths, in the way his hand still tightens when he hears the low drone of an aircraft engine overhead. A memory that refuses to fade. Charlie sits at a small wooden desk in his home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across framed photographs. Most are ordinary: family, holidays, grandchildren smiling into the camera. But one photograph does not hang. It lies flat on the desk, a faded black and white image of a B-17 Flying Fortress. Ye Olde Pub. Charlie runs his fingers along the edge of the photo. He doesn't need to close his eyes to see it again. The sky, the damage, the fighter sliding into view like a ghost. The salute. For years, he told himself it was a fluke, a strange, unexplainable moment in an otherwise brutal war. But the older he gets, the more it matters, because now he understands what it really was: a choice, and choices echo. The decision to look back. Charlie opens a drawer and removes a yellowed notebook. Inside are names, dates, scraps of information collected slowly, cautiously over time. He had never searched before. Not really. Life moved on. Work, family, the rhythm of peace. But now, Retirement has given him something dangerous. Time, and time makes room for unfinished things. He remembers the debriefing, the way everyone silently agreed to say nothing. Not because they were ordered, because they knew, because the enemy pilot had trusted them with his life. Charlie exhales. "I owe him," he mutters aloud. Not repayment, acknowledgement. A shot in the dark. Charlie writes a letter, not to the government, not to a historian, but to a Luftwaffe Veterans Association in Germany. The words come slowly, carefully. He describes the mission, the date, the damaged bomber, the escort, the salute. He asks a simple question. Does anyone know who this pilot was? He seals the envelope and waits. Meanwhile, in Canada, thousands of miles north, Franz Stigler is living quietly in Vancouver, British Columbia. He owns a small business. He attends church. He avoids talking about the war. When people ask, he gives them the shortened version. "I was a pilot." That's usually enough. But some nights, when sleep refuses to come, Franz still sees the bomber, still wonders, did they survive? Did they curse him? Did they forget? One afternoon, the phone rings. His wife answers, then pauses, then calls for him. "Franz," she says slowly, "there's an American on the line." Franz freezes. The room seems to shrink. He takes the receiver. His heart beats like it did at 25,000 feet. The call. The voice on the other end is older, measured, careful. "Mr. Stigler?" "Yes." "My name is Charlie Brown. I was the pilot of the B-17 you escorted on December 20th, 1943. Silence. Long. Heavy. Then Franz speaks, his voice barely steady. "I wondered if you made it." The truth comes home. They talk for hours about the mission, about the damage, about the decision not to fire, about the silence that followed. Every word lifts a weight both men have carried alone for decades. Franz learns that the bomber landed, that some lived, that his choice mattered. Charlie learns the risk Franz took, the danger, the possibility of execution. Neither man had fully understood the other's burden until now. When they finally meet in person, it is not dramatic. No uniforms, no medals, just two elderly men standing awkwardly in a living room. Then Charlie steps forward and hugs him. Franz does not pull away. He breaks. Quietly. The kind of breaking that sounds like relief. Brothers after war. They become inseparable. They attend air shows together, speak at schools, tell the story, not as a legend, but as a warning. They call each other brother, not as a metaphor, as fact. And when Franz Stigler dies in 2008, Charlie writes, "He was as much a hero to me as any man who wore my uniform." The question left behind. Why does this story endure? Because it reminds us that even in the most mechanized slaughter the world has ever known, the final decision still belongs to a human being, finger on a trigger or not. One chose mercy, the others chose silence, and together they defied the war.
Decades later, historians still debate missions, strategies, and numbers, but the story of Franz Stigler in the crew of Ye Olde Pug is not about tactics, it's about choice. The sky as a moral battlefield. Imagine yourself at 25,000 feet. The roar of engines surrounds you. Anti-aircraft fire explodes around your wings like angry fireworks. Your adversary approaches an impossible speed. You have seconds.
A finger presses a trigger. Do you pull it, or do you hesitate, even when hesitation could mean death? This is the moral calculus Franz faced that day. He was not naive. He knew what history demanded of him. Yet he chose something else: honor, humanity, a code older than ideology. What mercy cost? In the Luftwaffe, a pilot could be executed for showing leniency. Franz Stigler risked his career, his life, everything he had survived the war to protect. The risk was not abstract. He could have been labeled a traitor, court-martialed, or executed for treason. Yet he acted on principle, not strategy, not self-preservation, principle. That is a lesson often forgotten in war. One man's courage does not always require guns. It requires conscience. The Americans who chose silence. Meanwhile, the crew of Ye Olde Pub faced their own dilemma. They could report what happened, praise him, document the anomaly, but doing so would have sent a German pilot, someone who saves them, to certain death. So they kept quiet. 46 years of silence. It was not forgetfulness, it was respect, it was understanding. It was a recognition that in war, some debts cannot be repaid, only acknowledged. A lesson for future generations. When Franz and Charlie finally reunited, they did more than embrace. They told a story about the human choice in a mechanical war. They reminded the world that even when violence surrounds us, the capacity for mercy survives. It is a dangerous thing. It is rare, but it can change lives. It can save souls. The ripple effect. Consider this: a single act of mercy reverberated across decades. It saved Franz Stigler from despair and doubt. It saved the lives of the Americans who survived the flight. It created a bond that lasted decades, proving that even enemies can become brothers. And more subtly, it reminds us all, in history, the most impactful acts are often invisible. They leave no medal, no official record, only whispers, memories, and the quiet knowledge that someone chose right over easy, conscience over orders. The irony of war. Franz lived to see the destruction of the world he had defended. Charlie lived to honor the man who once threatened his life. History, in its strange justice, allowed both men to witness the ultimate paradox: mercy outlasts violence. And in the archives, in letters, in whispered memories, their story endures. The final thought. As you imagine the roar of engines, the cold biting through metal, the smoke curling from a crippled bomber, ask yourself, if it had been you, at 25,000 feet, with life and death in your hands, what would you do? Would you fire? Or would you let humanity guide your hand? Because that choice, that single impossible decision, can echo across a lifetime.
The story of Franz Stigler and Ye Olde Pub does not end with the war. It echoes through decades, touching lives far beyond the cockpit and the sky above Germany. Teaching honor in a world of machines. By the late 20th century, air combat is no longer fought with men at the controls of fragile aluminum birds. Jets scream faster than bullets ever could, guided by computers, sensors, and algorithms. Yet the lessons of December 20th, 1943 endure. Military academies around the world study the escort of Ye Olde Pub not as a tactical maneuver, but as a case study in moral courage. Students are asked to put themselves in Franz's cockpit, to calculate risk, yes, but also to recognize the weight of conscience in split-second decisions. It becomes a story about what kind of soldier we want to be, even when the world demands efficiency over empathy. The human side of victory. Victory is measured in numbers, medals, and territory, But Franz' act reminds us that war is not only about who survives, it is about who retains their soul. Charlie Brown's decision to protect Franz by keeping the incident secret demonstrates that courage is not always physical. Sometimes it is quiet, sometimes it is invisible, and yet it shapes history, because acts of mercy have consequences that outlive battles. The reunion and the bonds it forged. When Franz and Charlie finally meet in 1989, their embrace is more than emotion, it is history closing a circle. For the first time, decades of silent gratitude are spoken aloud. Other veterans watch in awe. Young historians record every word. The story becomes a symbol. Even in the darkest wars, humanity can survive if someone chooses it. Their friendship grows, enduring until Franz's death in 2008. Charlie Brown continues to speak on their behalf, ensuring that future generations know the importance of moral courage. The hidden power of one choice. Think about it. A single pilot with 5 kills already under his belt chooses not to fire. A single bomber crew chooses silence over recognition. That choice could have been meaningless, but it wasn't. It preserved life. It preserved honor. It created a legacy that bridges nations, languages, and decades. And it proves one undeniable truth. War can take everything, but mercy gives something back. Reflection for today. In an era of drone strikes, unmanned vehicles, and instant warfare, it is easy to forget that human decisions still matter. One split-second choice can ripple forward, changing the lives of people you may never meet. Franz Stigler and the crew of Ye Olde Pub remind us the human heart can survive even the machinery of war. It is not weakness, it is strength. In history, quiet, patient history, remembers. The final scene. Close your eyes, imagine the sky once more. The frozen air at 25,000 feet, the roar of engines, the silver bomber limping through the clouds, the fighter approaching, a shadow of death or mercy. A salute, a gesture, a decision that changed everything. History sometimes forgets names, sometimes it forgets battles, but it never forgets the moments when humanity chose to rise above war. And somewhere, far above, the ghost of that Messerschmitt lingers, not as a weapon, but as a symbol, that even in the war to end all wars, one human choice saved lives, souls, and the fragile spark of honor.